Well, hi. Once again, welcome back to Steps to Faith, and this is part 4 in our five-part video series. You've come a long way, baby. Good for you. You've made some tough choices. Maybe they weren't tough, but for some people, for mankind in general, they've been tough over the centuries. And they've been tough because we muddy the waters. And I think the enemy, Satan, who I believe literally exists, and you may not, but that's, we'll get there. We'll see how you feel about it by the end of this series. But the fact is, I believe that he is real, and he intentionally has confused things. The Bible calls him the author of confusion, such that each of these decisions has been muddied and confused and twisted and turned and spun into a million different tentacles of possibility, many of which all come back to the same simple choice, the choices we've been outlining in this video. A, do you believe in God with a brain or without? B, do you believe in a God who's mute or a God who speaks? C, do you believe the Bible is something to pursue as God's voice and the way he speaks? Or just do you choose babble, that is, your own, making up your own mind about God and pulling from a plethora of sources, most of which have no credibility? Last, well, not quite last, but the fourth step, the fourth choice you have to make is about Jesus himself. You see, if you've chosen to believe in God with a brain, if you've chosen to believe that he speaks, or at least consider it, if you've done the homework for step 3, which is significant, but you've proven that the Bible is clearly divinely, supernaturally inspired. It couldn't have been written by just, a bunch of 40 different authors and multiple different continents over a 1,500-year time period or more. I mean, that you realize there's just no way to have a consistent message in that kind of a scenario, and yet it has a consistent message of salvation, etc. If you've realized that, oh my gosh, the Bible really is the primary way, maybe not the only way, but a primary way that God speaks, and he does speak, you're going to have to address the question of Jesus. And here's what's sad. Right now, as I record this, we live in a culture and society where even Christians are doubting Jesus' own words, and yet claiming to follow him and believe in him and trust him. It'd be kind of like someone saying, hey, I trust you, and wherever you lead, I'll follow. You want to go to the store, I'll follow you to the store. You go to a restaurant, I'll go to the restaurant, wherever. And I'm with you, man. I'm with you through thick and thin. But then they secretly or quietly or maybe even blatantly say, hey, look, I don't know, that Joel guy, he takes a right turn when I think it should be a left turn. Most of what he says is pretty good, but, that whole thing about, love your wife, I don't think I should love my wife. You ever seen my wife? Oh, my gosh. Someone who did that, you'd say, what's wrong with you? You just said you believed and you're going to follow him and you trust him, but then you're saying you don't trust him and you don't believe him. I would argue we've got a good chunk of what's called Christian in our culture today, Christians or Christian churches or Christianity, that in fact are doing that very thing with Jesus. Let me give you a case in point. John 14, verse 6. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, if you believe the Bible's inspired, and it's the way that God speaks to us, or one of the primary ways, that's in the Bible, and it's not only in the Bible, but it claims to be the actual words of Jesus himself, you got an issue with Jesus. Because if you want to say there's multiple other ways, which is the predominant view of our culture, then you can't really trust what Jesus says because he just lied, in your opinion. I know of pastors who won't even preach that verse in its entirety because they don't believe it's true. Well, if you don't believe it's true, what else isn't true? And if the Bible's not true, then you're back to babble. And maybe we can just back up even another step. Maybe God doesn't speak at all. And as a matter of fact, maybe he doesn't even have a brain. But if you're taking the journey to this point, don't stop now. Face Jesus head on. And let's ask the question. And here it is. Is Jesus the way? Or is he a wacko? Or worse? It really is that simple. There is no other alternative. You see, when Jesus makes statements like that, or when he says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father God, or I and the Father are one, or before Abraham existed, I did, I am, I just am, self-existent, and I was there. And he uses a Hebrew name for God, by the way, in the original language when he makes that statement. If Jesus made those kind of statements, he is either telling the truth, and he's the way to God, and he is God, or he's nuts, I mean, can you imagine right now if I said to you, hey, thanks for listening to the video so far. Let me just tell you, I am God. Or I am the only way to God. No one comes to God except through me in this video. Would you continue to watch? I doubt it, and I hope not. I mean, if you did, it would just be to laugh. And maybe tell your friends, hey, look at this nut job. Right? Either Jesus is telling the truth in all those statements, and others I could quote as well, or he's nuts. Or maybe he's just sinister and evil, and he's deceiving people on purpose to lead them into some philosophy where he can control and manipulate them, or others are doing that using him as their manipulation key or some kind of trick. It really is one or the other. You know, you can't cut a middle path with Jesus. You can't delicatessen sort of smorgasbord, pick and choose. I like this about Jesus, but not that. And I've heard this. You know, I like his teaching. I just don't like the whole God thing and that he's the only way to God, because that's just too narrow-minded. How could you like his teaching if he's a liar? How could you like his teaching if he's crazy? Why would you listen to him in those cases? You know, do people, listen to Adolf Hitler's speeches if they think he's an evil, sinister man, which he was? No, they might listen just out of morbid curiosity or to show how crazy or evil he was, but they don't listen to get guidance for their life. Not unless they're a Nazi, right? So why would you listen to Jesus if he's sinister and deceiving people, or if he's just crazy? Certainly not to guide and direct your life. You can't pick and choose and say, I like his teaching, if in fact he's a wacko. So, your next step in the journey is to look at Jesus' life and teaching. Consider whether he really is the way to God. Now, I know that a million questions are going to come into your mind, and a million concerns will be planted there by, maybe already have been by others who say, wait a minute, you say Jesus is the way. Well, what about that poor guy in New Guinea in the jungle somewhere that never heard of Jesus? You're saying he's going to die and he's going to go to hell, he's going to suffer, he's going to this, he's going to that, I don't mind addressing those. I'd be thrilled to talk to you about those, but let's face it. Before we address those questions, we have to address the reality of whether Jesus is trustworthy or not, whether he is the way as he said he was or he's not. I suggest he is, in fact, the way. And I think he's made a way for the guy in the jungle of New Guinea and anywhere else, too, which I'd be happy to talk to you about sometime. But be that as it may, he made the claim. I didn't. And if it's true, then that's pretty important. If it's not true, well then, forget it. And we're back to square one here, really. But you've got to decide. And you've got to face those questions. And we're happy to help you do it. As I said in the last video, you can always call us at 860-436-9216. And you can email us at office@millpondchurch.org. But for today, I would encourage you to make the choice to embrace Jesus as the way, just as he said he was. That God, in his intelligence, created the universe, spoke through his word, the Bible, and his prophets of old, and prophesied and promised that Jesus would come. Do you know that Jesus fulfilled over 300 promises in his lifetime? Do you know that a mathematician once figured out that the probability of Jesus fulfilling 30 of those was 1 out of 10 to the 17th power possibilities? That's like winning the lottery every day of your life. For 60, 70, 80 years. Every day you play the lottery and every day you win. The probability of you doing that is probably greater than the probability of 1 out of 10 to the 17th power, opportunities, which is the probability of one man randomly, accidentally fulfilling prophecies about like where he'd be born, what people would say when he died, what people would do while he was dying, things he had no control over. And by the way, we have evidence of some of those things that goes outside the Bible, evidence from secular historians even. So, how's that possible? Well, mathematically it isn't. But spiritually and supernaturally, well, that's a different story. So, if you've proven the Bible's true, then you've got to wrestle with the question of Christ. And if he fulfilled 30 to 50 prophecies in 1 week and 300 over his lifetime, again, about things some of which he had no control over, then maybe he is the one that was promised. Maybe God in his intelligence did make a way for all men to come to him if they would choose it, and promised to lead them to himself if they would seek him. Jesus said, ask, and it'll be given. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be open. The idea that someone in some jungle somewhere can't find him if they're looking contradicts his own words and his own teaching. And by the way, it contradicts the realities of history too. But all that said, you and I have to decide, am I going to embrace him as the way, or am I going to look for another way and basically write him off as a nut job or an evil, sinister being? If you decide to pursue him as the way, then watch the next video. And if you have questions, give us a call. God bless you. We'll see you next time.